We have with us today Kacey McNally, who is the Director of Pupil Appraisal with Jefferson Parish Schools. And Kacey, thanks so much for being with us today to talk about a medical diagnosis versus a school exceptionality. It's a question we get a lot at Families Helping Families. So thanks for being here.
Absolutely. So I am going to let you know that I did bring in with me my coordinator of pupil appraisal, who is Michelle Troxler. And so I'm going to go ahead and get started. And I do not mind staying on afterwards if anybody has any questions that they would like for me to answer afterwards. Because this is a topic that we get in Jefferson all the time, people not understanding. Parents come in and say, my kiddo has an exceptionality of autism, and they're not understanding it's a medical diagnosis, totally different, and it doesn't always mean they qualify for a Bulletin 1508 exceptionality. So that's kind of our goal today, is just to give you the difference between the two. And I know it's something that really would take forever to really understand, but I'm not going to give you the full meat and potatoes because we don't have time. I'm just going to give you a little appetizer so that you understand the difference between the two. First of all, a medical diagnosis. This is the definition coming straight from the DSM-5, which is the guidelines that medical professionals use. So autism means persistent difficulties with social communication and social interactions, and restricted and repetitive patterns of behaviors, activities, or interests, which include sensory behavior. They're present since early childhood to the extent that they limit and impair everyday functioning. So basically, a medical diagnosis is made by a doctor or other specially trained clinician. They use the DSM, which is the Diagnostic Statistic Manual for Mental Disorders. And this is how they do their diagnosis. Whereas in educational classification, we go by Bulletin 1508. So first and foremost, it is not a medical diagnosis. It is an educational classification, or it's an educational exceptionality. It's not a doctor. It's a team of school-based people. But our definition from Bulletin 1508 is autism spectrum disorder means a developmental disability significantly affecting verbal and nonverbal communication and social interaction, generally evident before the age of 3, that adversely affects a student's educational performance. Other characteristics often associated with autism are engagement in repetitive activities and stereotype movements, resistance to environmental change or change in daily routines, and unusual responses to sensory experiences. So first and foremost, I have highlighted or bolded adversely affects a student's educational performance. That is one of the main difference between a medical diagnosis versus an educational classification. Lack of a better way to say it, you can be as autistic as the day is long, but if it doesn't impact a student's educational performance, they do not qualify as a student with an educational classification. The other thing with it, just because it impacts educational performance doesn't always necessarily mean they qualify as a Bulletin 1508 special education student, because they also would need to have special instruction. So if they don't require special education services, they could be a student with autism that really just qualifies for 504 accommodations. So in order to be a special ed student because of autism, you have to have the characteristics of autism, which we will go through in a second, but it must adversely affect a student's educational performance and that student must require special education services. So I think I honestly just said most of this. So basically, what's the difference? Simple. The fundamental distinction between a medical diagnosis and an educational classification is the impact the condition has on a student's learning. And this isn't just for autism. This could be for any other exceptionality, for any medical condition, for a seizure disorder, for asthma, for ADHD. Regardless of the medical diagnosis, if it doesn't have an impact on the student's learning, they do not qualify for special education. So therefore, when the educational team is trying to do that evaluation to determine if the student meets eligibility criteria according to Bulletin 1508, they must say that the symptoms interfere with learning and that student needs special services in order to make academic progress. They don't just need some accommodations, but they actually need special education services, which then can include classroom instruction, as well as related services such as speech therapy, occupational therapy, social work services. And then, like I kind of hinted at earlier, students who don't necessarily qualify for special education, we may be able to offer them services under the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, where we give them 504 accommodations within the regular classroom. So I'm going to talk to you for a few minutes about the criteria for an educational classification, because you have to meet the criteria first, and then we determine how that impacts education. So in order to qualify for autism, the criteria, we have to look at communication. We have to look at relations to people, event, and objects. And then we also have to look at restricted, repetitive, and or stereotyped patterns of behavior and or activities. So the first thing we look at is communication. According to Bulletin 1508, these are the things that we do look at when we're evaluating a kid based on communication for autism. And I have the number 2 up there because when we're looking at this, we have to find that the child shows at least 2 of these impairments. Most of them are straightforward. I don't really want to read to you, but I do want to go down to G, because sometimes we get some people who aren't really quite sure about that one. Marked impairment in the use and or understanding of nonverbal and or symbolic communication. So this kind of means it goes a little bit hand in hand with J, scarcity of symbolic play. You know, the kiddos who are using, say, a stick as a sword, you know, they're fighting Dungeons and Dragons and they have the imagination, they can use a stick as a sword. Our kiddos with autism don't understand that the stick is a sword. To them, a stick is a stick. So that's what we mean by kind of G and J. Those 2 kind of confuse people at times. And then the other one that kind of confuses people is letter H, which is prosody variances, which basically means the child can talk very monotone, very high and squeaky all the time. Like there's no pitch, there's no inflections. It's just all flat or all very high pitched. So those kinds of things. And then of course the other ones, I don't mind sharing this PowerPoint with Miss Sharon so that she can share with all of you guys as well. But that's what we look at on the communication aspect. And because of it, for autism, we absolutely have to have a speech therapist involved in the evaluation. Relating to people, events, and or objects, we look at this as well, and they have to show at least 4 impairments in this area. Typically, this one is more looking at the school psychologist and maybe the educational diagnostician to see which one of these areas the child is at risk or which behaviors they exhibit. And this is not being able to develop those in the personal relationships with other students, with, peers, or with adults. It's not being able to make believe or play. It's, working or playing parallel to another student, kind of side to side and mimicking and doing what the other student's doing, but not any kind of real social interactions with the other student, just this parallel play. It's not being spontaneous, not understanding other children's social cues, when someone's sad or happy, those types of things. But this is a list of all that Bulletin 1508 sets forth, and the kiddo has to exhibit at least 4 of those things. And then finally, we look at behavior in a sense of very restricted, very repetitive, very stereotyped. And those are the kinds of things that we see often, trying to have the kiddos transition from recess to math or from math to reading. We have those kiddos who have fascinations with objects and, spin the wheels on certain toys or run the car toy back and forth. They get sensory stimulation by rocking, by flapping, those kinds of things. Those kiddos who line things up. But yeah, my closet's very organized, but not to the sense where I get upset when it's not. It's those kiddos who line up their toys in whatever pattern they think is appropriate. And when you move something or it changes on them, they get very upset and emotional over the fact that things aren't the way they perceive that they are supposed to be. So I'm going to stop there for a second and talk once again about the difference between the two. So we do know that one is done by a medical diagnosis. It's typically a medical diagnosis. It's one clinician who is basing it on the child's symptoms, and there's no impact. It's just the child displays these symptoms. The clinician says, yes, they have this medical diagnosis. However, then we look at the educational component of it, and it's a team approach. We're looking at, does the child display these symptoms? But most importantly, does it impact their learning? Does it impact it so significantly that they need special education instruction? It's done by a team of people. We never do any evaluation with just one sole person. It's always got at least 2. But when we're looking at autism, we typically have at least 4, maybe 5 professionals. It's got to be a school psychologist or other person who has the same credentials as far as doing evaluations, the psychological component. It has to be an educational diagnostician. There has to be a speech therapist. There has to be an occupational therapist to look at those sensory issues that these kiddos typically display. And then quite often, we also include social workers in these evaluations. So I know that was a lot of information, kind of watered down so that we could get this all done in 15 minutes. But I think it's also important to talk just for a second, because I know my time's running out, just for a second about some recommendations for these kiddos. And I just listed a few things that are pretty common across the board. They work for our kiddos, and that's social skills training, such as social stories, which is why we try very hard to include our social workers. visual schedules or prompts so that they see what's coming. You know, they did reading, they move on to the next thing. They did math, but they see it. They're very visual. Cool down corners work. They can take breaks. One that works very, very well with our autistic kiddos are first then cards, because they always want to do the then, but they don't want to do what comes first. So you let them know when you use that language, first we do this, then we do this, using a timer for transitions, letting them know ahead of time. In 5 minutes, we're going to be stopping this to move on to this, but a timer that they can see really helps. Differential reinforcement. Of course, getting any of your pupil appraisal representatives or social workers involved so that they can sit there and do a real behavior intervention plan, go in and try to figure out why is the kiddo acting the way they are, and develop a behavior intervention plan. And I'm going to end it with, I know medical doctors tell you stay away from Google, but if you get on the right sites and you Google different recommendations and accommodations for autistic kiddos, there is a wealth of knowledge out there. There are so many interventions that people are coming up with, things that are working. So sometimes Google can be your friend and you can get a lot of good ideas for interventions and recommendations for kiddos in the classroom who do have a classification of autism. I'm sorry, I went fast. I tried to get it done as quickly as I could, but like I said, this is something you really could talk about for a really long time. So I apologize that I kind of, was speed racer while I was speaking through it. But I am happy to answer any questions or stay on with people who do want to stay on so that, I can share any knowledge that I might have that they would want.
Kacey, that was a great explanation, and I appreciate it.
Oh.
I was wondering about the diagnoses that that you most often see having an issue, and besides autism, what are some of the diagnoses that you might have a medical diagnosis that would normally result in a special education, in special education services, but don't always? What are some others that you might know?
Number one is ADHD. So I can tell you that 90% of the time, ADHD is absolutely going to require a 504 plan, because those kiddos typically need extra time and reminders, things that we can accommodate in the classroom just by some little interventions, some recommendations, modifications, accommodations in the classroom. But most people are thinking if there's a diagnosis, they automatically qualify for special education. They may, it just depends on the impact that they have. But I do want to say we try really hard. Our goal is not to offer kids services. That's definitely not our goal. But my goal personally is, what can we do for this kiddo to keep them out of special education? What can we do to keep them in the regular classroom in the least restrictive environment?
Right.
So I would much rather try to put in interventions, accommodations first. And if that works, great, then we never have to go to a special education setting. Sometimes we put in the greatest interventions in the world and they don't work and it's not appropriate. And yes, we end up moving forward with the evaluation. But as a classroom teacher, as pupil appraisal, and as a parent, we do want to try the least restrictive first. But those are the two big ones, autism and ADHD, that, the parents think it automatically gets them that special education fix, and it doesn't necessarily.
Gotcha.
Specifically, real quickly,
Mm-hmm.
we get evaluations from a medical diagnosis with a medical diagnosis, and they do levels, level 1, 2, 3, or 4. 4 being more severe, level 1 being very minor support needed. And quite often, more often than not, probably a level 1 autism isn't going to qualify for an educational classification because it's such a mild, I don't want to say a
The
mild,
symptoms.
Right.
their symptoms are, they're less symptomatic, their support needs are minimal, and so they don't require, it doesn't impact education, they don't require some kind of special ed services. So those are our kiddos that will be perfectly fine in the regular classroom, or they may just need a few accommodations through 504. So we don't differentiate level 1, 2, 3, or 4 when we're doing an educational evaluation. However, our medical experts do. And like I said, level 1, more often than not, I'll never say, anything conclusively, but they don't necessarily qualify for the educational classification.
Wow. We have a comment in the chat. I'm a former special educator and I worry that I've helped my child too much at home, so she didn't get quote unquote labeled. Now she's in high school in Orleans Parish and they don't see any issues. I think that would be a compliment myself, that that she is absolutely functioning in the regular education setting. To me, that would be a goal. But Erin, if there is something that that you wanted to say specifically, feel free to open your mic.
Yeah, Erin, is she being successful currently?
Yes, very much so. Thank y'all. She is being very successful,
Kudos
but
to you and her.
thank you. I mean, we have visual schedules. We would not have been able to get out the door. It was funny when you were saying those things. It is a matter of she is holding in all that stress so much, and they think that she just needs to not try as hard. Whereas we know she's had ADD. We know that she may be one of your level 1 kids on the spectrum, but it is something that she also lost my husband when she was a year old. Like, there are things that I don't want her to hold on to that label. I want her to be herself and be the best self she can be. And she is. It's just a matter of, I patted the crutch too much so they don't see that her leg is actually broken. You know what I'm saying?
I do. So have you reached out to Pupil Appraisal down there?
Oh,
504? I mean, are they providing any accommodations for her, or are they not seeing any problems, so no help?
a 504 that I had to fight for with, it's just a pass to the counselor.
So
I know you can't read my face because I'm trying to not show you how upset I am. So,
but just know that a 504 plan, if the child qualifies for 504 services under the Rehabilitation Act, an IAP gets written, and you as the parent are the most important person on that team. So
I would tell my former parents that. Yeah.
So you, along with, and she's in high school now, so she's absolutely should be part of that team. You and your child can go in and offer suggestions and come up with some accommodations that you guys would think are appropriate and things that she needs. When was the last time she had an ADHD, any kind of reeval? I mean, not ADHD, autism.
Well, so we never pushed into that. We were just looking at learning stuff. And there's definitely some kind of processing something going on. And it's a matter of, I worry that people don't understand, and I know that sounds nuts because it's 2023, but don't understand ADHD. And
They don't.
okay,
They
good.
don't. confirming many people out there. And unfortunately, we still have many teachers who don't really understand it.
You know, my generation it could be spanked out or punished out or whatever, or shamed out. You know, you'll just stop being the way you are. And that's not true. It's not fair. It's all those
I have
things.
to give
So,
most of our teachers credit, but yes, we do still have some teachers who do not understand special education, 504, or disabilities in general. But I
okay.
would certainly,
So just keep
Yeah.
pushing.
I would. And like I said, you and the child, nobody knows her better than she does. And you would be the second person. You know her better than the school-based people do. And so I would keep pushing if you think it's something that she really, truly would benefit from. And then they need to explain to you why they don't think it's appropriate.
So if they say, and it's because I used to be a teacher and a special ed teacher, both general and regular, and general and special. But sorry, there's so much I just want to keep you on the thing the whole day. Sorry. But I know y'all are busy. They're saying that teachers say there's not a need, but all the teachers we've talked to are saying we totally understand she needs help, and
So who says
like
there's not a need?
the admin. Yeah. But
Well,
I
the
wonder,
IAP includes the teachers.
Yeah.
So I would start there with
okay.
writing an email that you would like to have an IAP meeting with all parties involved, administration, classroom teachers, and go with
Okay.
what you think would accommodate her, what she needs, not what's going to enable her, but what will give her that level playing field, and start there with the entire team and have a frank discussion.
Okay. Okay. Thank you very much. I
Absolutely.
feel like I don't want to be the one who, I mean, I was in California and I know there were parents who like, oh, wow. I don't want to be like that, but I don't want to go viral, right? I just don't want to fuss too much. And I think that's funny because the people who are saying that are the people who are the older people who always thought the spankings would help. So,
Beat it out of her. Yes.
yeah. And this is not a kid who,
No.
yeah, she's not a jerk. Okay. Thank y'all.
Good
Absolutely.
luck, Erin. Thank you for sharing that.
Well,
And Erin,
thank
reach out if I can help you anyway. I mean, I'm Jefferson, that's Arlene's, but
I
I
appreciate
don't
it so
mind
much.
guiding. Absolutely.
Thank you. I'm so glad I got on. Thank you.
And Erin, you're not the only one. We have another comment, same issues here as Erin for my fifth grader. So you brought up some things that are important for others. It's not just you. So thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, thank you.
Anyone else have any questions or comments? I really appreciate Kacey staying on a little longer to accommodate questions. That was very, very nice of you, Kacey. Thank you.
No worries. Absolutely.
All right. Well, I have dropped the I better drop it again. It got covered up with other comments. That's good. I put the evaluation link in the chat box. So if you wouldn't mind just grabbing that while we continue to take questions, I appreciate it. And I will share these results with you, Kacey, as well. All right. Anyone else? And if you'll send me the PowerPoint, I will also send that out in an email a little later on. All right. I think that's going to be it. But thank you so much. I just really appreciate you and Michelle. Thank you, Michelle, for sitting in. And I definitely will talk with you again maybe after the holidays and see if we can get you on for a little bit longer.
Sure. Absolutely.
Talk about some more stuff. I like it. It's good.
Perfect. Well, enjoy the holidays. I can't believe we got like 2 weeks till Thanksgiving.
Right.
Which means 5 weeks till Christmas. So.
Right. Yeah, no.
All
right, everyone.
Guys, y'all have a fabulous day, and I will share the PowerPoint with you, and I'll talk with you soon.
All right. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you, guys.